All right. So welcome to Improve Your Hustle with Kendall Bonner and my very, very, very special guests, Matt Van Winkle and Nick Bailey. Gentlemen, I just want to thank you so much for coming in here today to talk to me about these hot topics and headlines because there's just so much noise out there in the industry right now. And I know so many guests and professionals they can't make heads or tails of it. So honored to have you here. And I would love for you to share with our audience if these headlines and topics are industry disruption, industry distraction, or industry direction, and why. So we've got 6 topics plus 2 bonuses to discuss today. So let's get into it.
Great.
So the first
Sounds
one
great.
is, first up, Brian Buffini. We all know who he is. He does these interesting annual broadcasts titled Buffini's Bold Predictions, as well as media reviews. This last media review, he offered a little bit of controversy because he stated that real estate companies will remain in flux and that there'll be some significant reduction in the number of brokerages over the next, I think it was 5 years, correct me if I'm wrong, but going from 80,000 brokerages to a projected 10 to 15,000. That's huge. So do you agree, disagree? What does this mean for brokers and realtors? And of course, is this a disruption, a distraction, or is it indicative of the industry's direction? I'd like to start with you, Matt.
Sure. Yeah. So when I saw this when he first made that bold prediction, I mean, it resonated with me a little bit, and I kind of saw it as the direction that we've been going. I do think it's an industry direction. I don't think it's a distraction or disruption. And then as I started kind of watching everything that's been happening this year from the Association of Realtors, the way that the Northwest MLS, which is my MLS, is publishing commissions, and started to see these trends that are happening, I really do think that this is the direction that we're going. I think that we're going to see a massive consolidation in the brokerage space. And it's going to be driven by changes in how agents have to work. And it's going to push a lot of agents out of business, and brokerages that are built around low producing agents who close a couple transactions a year are going to financially struggle. And as a result, they will close or be consolidated by other brokerages.
So do you think that's like the inventory is going to impact that at all? Or you just think it's going to be because of, the skill set required in the market? I mean, why do you think that's the case?
I believe that the average agent right now does 3.1 transactions a year, 3.5, somewhere in that range. And that's where it's been kind of maintaining. And so if you look at a real estate agent who's making 25,000 GCI, 29,000 GCI, which is where the average is, and if they start to see continued downward pressure on commissions, they're going to leave the business. So if our average commission used to be 6 and now we're at 5 and we're starting pushing more towards 4 in most markets, the agent who's doing 3 transactions a year at 2% commission or 1.5% commission, if they're not able to really articulate their value to the consumer, they're not going to be financially able to stay in business. Brokerages that are built around, we know the brokerages that have 200 agents and 100 of them close less than 3 transactions a year, but the brokerage is taking 40% or 50%, so it's okay, from a brokerage viability standpoint. But as those agents start to drop out, those brokerages are going to not be able to keep their doors open. I think it's going to be the consumer is demanding an increase in the professionalism, the skill set, and the competence of an agent, and agents that can't keep up are going to be pushed out.
Got it. Nick, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. First off, I love Brian Buffini. I've always been a huge fan of his. But to answer your question, one is I agree it's direction. That being said, our industry never moves as fast in the direction that we think it's going to go. Let's look at MLS consolidations are a great example. We had 800 how many years ago? Maybe we're down to 600. It probably should be 100, but it's not consolidating fast enough. I believe, and I've been talking about it the last couple of months in the industry, that the number one risk to a broker is if you are an unaffiliated, non-branded broker with 25 agents or less. You don't have the margins, you don't have the scale. You typically, as Matt said, don't have the production of the agents. You don't have ancillary services nor qualify for them to expand your profitability. And consumers definitely want a better experience. I have a saying that if buyers and sellers, or we as consumers, had to buy or sell a piece of real estate every 30 days, would the process look different? Yes or no? The answer is 100% yes. We had a fun survey I was involved with 2 years ago that we asked people, after they got to closing, would you like to do this again? And 60% of them said they'd rather have a root canal. I mean, that's what consumers are saying to us. And so we're not getting through the direction of the process fast enough. But that's where technology comes into it. And these smaller brokerages that can't leverage a brand or scale can't bring the technology to use in an effort to create a better consumer experience through the transaction. So they're going to have huge pressure. I mean, I've been a licensee, I've been a broker for 23 years. And from the day I started to today, it has always been everybody's old, they're retiring. But look at how it ebbs and flows. You know, we're 1.4 plus million realtors. We were down to 900,000. And let's just face it, we're in a mediocre industry because of the ability to get into it doesn't take much. And so we'll always likely have 700,000 to 1 million people that don't do much. But the direction piece of it is that it used to be a lot easier to pick off 1 or 2 deals and sell to your parents or your aunt and uncle. But I think because the consumers are demanding a better experience, and a lot of us are trying to solve for it using technology, that's where the smaller broker is going to have a much more difficult time in doing so.
So you're talking about technology as one of the major differentiators between an independent brokerage and let's say a bigger brand, right? Or a bigger brokerage that can afford more. When you say technology, that's such a big word for a lot of people. What specifically are you talking about? Are you talking about the websites, the mobile sites, the CRM, app features? I mean, social media marketing, like what do you mean? Because a lot of people associate all those things with technology.
I love the question. We all have these, right? Remember the first time you met someone that had an iPhone, if it didn't happen to be you? You said, hey,
right.
Can I touch it and feel it? And it was a unique differentiator.
Right.
Well, today, I know both of you pretty well, but I have no idea what kind of device you carry. But that's where we're getting to in technology, that the things that you mentioned, Kendall, the websites, a CRM, everybody can have those basics. But this is, to me, going to be the differentiator with technology, is it has to focus on 2 things. One, we talked about the consumer experience. I mean, I jumped out this summer and sold 3 houses in August. I hadn't transacted in 18 years, had to make sure what I was preaching still worked. And what I found is my clients were still texting, calling, and emailing me. I mean, Facebook said a year ago that email would be dead in 5 years. I mean, please, can that happen? I mean, it would make my day. But we've got to use tech to interface to create a better experience with the consumer. And the most remedial example are Uber Eats or the Domino's Pizza app. We got your order, it's in the oven, it's on the way, and we watch it. We are going to have to take a complicated process and use tech to specifically deliver a better experience that the consumers can stay involved in the transaction. So it's not just about the surface level of CRMs and websites and social, it's now about what they do for the consumer. The second piece of it is, how do we make it a productivity tool for real estate agents? 94% of buyers and sellers say they would use their agent again. Generally speaking, 9.6% do. We as agents are terrible at keeping in touch with our consumers. And we know agents, and I'm one. If there's 12 steps in something, we do 3. If there's 3, we do 1. And I'm not casting negativity on my friends, because I'm saying, hey, I'm just as guilty, Your Honor. But what I know is, if we use the tech then to say, hey, to the agents, this is one segment. We see a lot of your business from your contacts using another agent, is, let's face it, buyers, sellers are out there generating leads, and they're all over the place. And it's easy to pick off your sphere. It's easier today than ever before to lose business out of your sphere or past clients. And so we've got to be thinking more creatively about now how to make the tech used for production for an agent, and at the same time a better experience by linking it together.
So those are some interesting points, because I think, and honestly, talking about technology and protecting your sphere leads really well into the next topic, right? Which is another huge pain point for real estate professionals right now, which is, the iBuyers, the Zillow instant offers, Opendoor, OfferPad. This group reminds me of FOMO for agents, because agents are afraid they'll miss out on opportunities because they're being sold or stolen by iBuyers and such. And before I have you guys really comment on that, I do want to share a statistic I found last night in preparing for today, and I'll link it in the show notes, that the share of residential property sales to iBuyers in 2016 was 3.9%. In 2017, it was 6.6%. And in 2018, 9.6%. So it's like basically a rough 3% increase year over year, 3 years in a row. Is it does that mean that there's something important here that we should be paying attention to, or is this just another disruption or distraction, or again, new direction? I'll start with you, Nick, on this one, being who you used to work for.
I'm sure that's in the notes. Yeah, I used to work for Zillow. I did. So when it comes to iBuyer space, Kendall, to say disruption, distraction, or direction, I would say it's going to be a little bit of all three. Sounds a little political for me to answer that way, but here's why. The direction piece of it is because it's creating an easier experience for someone to sell their home. That is total direction. And that's what we're trying to solve for in many ways. That could also be classified as disruption because of how consumers are entering and selecting and raising their hand to have their home sold in this manner. Here's where it's a bigger distraction though. Cash buyers are not new. And you hear, I refer to We Buy Ugly Houses, and the tech makes it different, but we have had cash buyers, and there have been groups that come from Wall Street or hedge funds, groups that have packaged and walked into a market. By the way, they're generally homogenous in style, and they're generally the lowest 10% of the market. And so this is not something that I believe every home is going to be sold and bought by a cash buyer. And so the distraction part of it is, when I was just this summer, I went to 2 of the iBuying platforms and had them pull 2 cash offers and lined them out to the other 4 that I had obtained so that my seller could look at all 6. We didn't select the 2 in the iBuyer platform because they were more concerned with equity. Mm-hmm. And we could still get them moved in 3 weeks versus 17 days for a lot more in their pocket. And so as these iBuyers, there's a lot more choice. I think what we're going to see happen is, and some of them, by the way, have bought market share. I've seen countless examples of them overpaying for properties. And what it's going to come down to is when average days on market start to increase, which they will going into next year, and the cost of holding these properties as a cash buyer starts to change. We have historically seen cash buyers that are holding real estate investments, whether they're flipping them or renting them, when days on market start to extend, it changes their behavior. They all of a sudden are not as aggressive on price when they're purchasing, and they want to get rid of them faster. And so that changes the dynamics of how cash buyers work. So we can't forget that's at the baseline of what they are. The other thing that I think consumers are going to realize is there are commissions are negotiable. They always have been. And as you look at equity, you can negotiate commissions. Well, a lot of these have service fees associated with them that aren't necessarily negotiable, and sometimes more expensive than what they can negotiate with an agent's commission. So I think those are all the pieces that are distractions that time will bring that together. So we'll see. I don't think $3 billion again is going to pour in this next year into the iBuyer platform. I think we're going to see consolidations. I think you'll see a couple of them get knocked out of the market. I think they'll continue to exist, but likely be in the single digits of market share.
Got it. Matt, what about you?
I would agree with that. I mean, from what I've seen, and our market doesn't have a lot of the properties that are appealing to the iBuyer. We don't have those, tract homes or a lot of subdivisions that are all very similar. But when I look at the fees that I've seen charged by the iBuyers, most homeowners are going to be in a better position unless they really need to sell it fast. They're going to be in a better position to sell it with a competent agent who can, make it as streamlined a process as possible, but get them top dollar for their property. But then as we're also kind of looking at the sustainability of it, I think is going to be one of the big issues. I mean, Open Door was able to create so much market share because of their access to capital. But I think everything shows that they are not going to have that the easy wallet that they've had in the past to continue to give them so much capital to be able to go out and do these acquisitions and acquire these properties when they're looking at a very, very small margin. I think it's a disruption because the concept is very, very appealing. If there was actually a way to create a model where you could go in and sell your house for the same net proceeds that you would get selling it on the market or reasonably close, I think a lot of consumers would look at that. But the logistics of actually being able to do a business model that works that way is nearly impossible. So I think the consumer loves the idea of being able to almost trade in your house and go get another house, with an easy process, but real estate just doesn't work that way. And so I think that the concept is could be a disruption, but what we're really seeing is we're seeing a distraction because it's, you know, it's the boogeyman is out there to take away the real estate job. And it's going to take a portion of the market. There's going to be a portion of the market where this is appealing, and that's the way that it's going to be. But I don't see it, I don't see it growing past single digits, 15% or, kind of even in that range. And it's really going to be market specific as well. I think it's most markets are not going to see it on a large scale.
Well, so one of the things that I think about when I think about iBuyers in this particular situation is, consumer awareness, right? I mean, I feel like it's probably not as big of a deal to the consumer as it is to us that are in the industry, because we're very hyper aware of this iBuyer concept. And like I said, unfortunately, a lot of the awareness that agents have is fear driven. Oh my God, they're coming in to take my job, and I'm going to not be able to sell real estate ever again, and this is going to harm my business. But really, I just wonder, how aware is the actual consumer about this opportunity that they have, and are they even, really grasping at it? Because in so many ways, it is so much more expensive than to sell your home traditionally. So there's that, and there's also just I imagine some skepticism that probably exists in the eye of the consumer of, hey, if it's too good to be true, it probably isn't, right? Like this very fast and easy way. Any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the marketing around these programs has been very compelling to the consumer, but they forget to talk about what I've seen, 12 to 16% service fees. Right. So it's a scenario where if the consumer is aware of it, the consumer is not aware of how much it costs. Right. And when you really start to dig into the math, then I think that they start to, they realize that it's not actually saving them money necessarily. But I don't think the consumer pays as much attention to real estate as we do. The consumer doesn't care until it's time to buy or sell, and that's only every 10 years.
Well, and I think that's a very good point. Agree 100%. The other piece of it is we've been in basically a 12-year run-up in a seller's market. So you've got home sellers, which, by the way, you look at last year, we always talk about the percentage of first-time home buyers. Last year, 64% were first-time home sellers. So the vast majority are doing this for the first time. And in any scenario, when it's your first time, generally people look back and say, hey, this is what I liked about what I did. Maybe I would have considered this differently the second time. But going back to the fact that we've had basically a 12-year run-up in a seller's market, you have a lot of homeowners that are looking and saying, wow, I didn't know my home was worth that much. And so to take a haircut, not to vacuum and make the beds, I'm in. Right. We start to move average days on market out, get to more equilibrium, or even in the next few years, if we were to go to a buyer's market, all of a sudden now when the equity's under fire, the homeowners are going to sit up and look a little closer. The other thing that this reminds me of, because you brought up where I used to work, is the AVM process. Look at what happened when we had valuation models that first started to hit for homeowners. They were obsessed with it, and they were laser focused in that my house was worth exactly what this website told me it was. Well, now what we've seen with these AVM models is, because they're not perfect, people are putting up 2 or 3 of these AVMs side by side on the website. And the delta between what the house is worth, the homeowner's going, what is it? Is my house 450, 375, or 515? I better call an agent and figure this out. I think the same thing is going to happen. The more that we see options for cash buyers and iBuyer platforms, there's going to be so many different choices on value and so much difference and the delta between them, that they're going to be looking for an advisor to say, should I take this cash offer or this cash offer? Or maybe I should take a financed offer. And so that's something that I would forecast that we'll see a year from now.
Interesting. Okay, good. I think that will really help some of our audience kind of maybe better digest and hopefully not be too skeptical or afraid of the iBuyer experience. Because I think there's an opportunity there too, in the fact that sellers are raising their hand saying, I need to sell my home, or I'd like to sell my home.
Well, and agents, Kendall, let me say this. If there are agents listening, leverage them. They are cash buyers that have raised their hand and said, for the right type of house, we will buy a house for cash. Have the agents lean into it, grab those offers and put them in front of their sellers. They are just an option that they can go with, but the agent shouldn't, put it this way, the agent should be engaging in that process, not letting the consumer do it on their own, because at the end of the day, they're likely going to have questions about it and will appreciate the help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to switch into the next topic because this one is also a huge hot button right now. I think, well, at least it's been for most of the year. And I think a lot of agents do not understand the magnitude and or, the implications of this particular topic, which is the headline of the commission publication and transparency, right? So the Northwest MLS, which directly impacts Matt's offices, as well as Redfin, has started publishing the commissions offered to co-broke. So this, is definitely new because most MLSs, it's a violation of the MLS rules to share data sheets disclosing co-broke commissions with the public, right? So, and then to further complicate the topic, which I found the most interesting, was the Department of Justice, did an inquiry this year with CoreLogic, which is a major vendor for most of the US MLSs, about how agents are sharing their listings based on co-broke commissions, and if that is happening, right? So basically, they're looking for violations of the antitrust law. So Matt and I are both lawyers, so I think we'll both kind of give our rendition of what the antitrust laws is. So basically what I prepared for our audience here is it's the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. And the broad purpose of the act is to preserve, a competitive marketplace, protect consumers from abuses. It prohibits anti-competitive agreements and unilateral conduct that monopolizes and attempts to monopolize a relevant market, right? In our case, it would be real estate. And it gives the power to the DOJ, which is the Department of Justice, to bring lawsuits and prohibit conduct that violates the act. But there's multiple elements to allege. It's not necessarily a simple one, but it's where people will hear words like conspiracy, monopoly, market manipulation, and restraint of competition. So Matt, I don't know, that was not layman's terms, but I don't know if you have a better layman's term definition of that. And of course, we don't want to violate the rule here today by doing anything that would be considered a violation. But the inquiry is interesting to me in light of the other changes to the MLS. Do you think the Northwest MLS, Matt, is the direction of our industry now or something else?
Yeah, so I think that the publishing of commissions, I think this is the direction. I think it's happening a little faster than was anticipated, but our rule went into effect October 1st, and I've already had multiple broker owners in other markets call me because their board is considering a similar type rule in other markets around the country. And I think that it kind of comes back to what you said. It's about transparency. It's making sure that the consumer understands what's going on and what's part of this transaction. And I think that as an industry, we've sort of, we've positioned ourselves where we have not clearly articulated what it is that we're doing for the consumer and how the process works. And when the consumer doesn't feel that they have all of the information and they don't feel like an industry is being forthcoming, then the consumer, doesn't trust us. And so I think having this information out there, I think it's done a couple of things. I think buyers are tired of paying the commission and not controlling the commission. The buyer is hiring somebody to do work for them, but the buyer doesn't control how much that person gets paid. They don't know how much that person's getting paid, yet they're the ones that are having to pay for it. So I really do think that this is one of the trends in the industry towards transparency, towards putting everything out on the table that's going to force us as brokers and as agents to redefine to the consumer what value we bring to the transaction. I kind of look at it where, there's a lot of agents that were concerned in my market about this publishing, and I could tell that the underlying fears where they were concerned that if the consumer found out how much they were getting paid, the consumer would be upset because they were making too much. And my thought on that is, if you're afraid of your client finding out how much you got paid, then you've got a really big problem because you have not articulated enough value and you're not showing enough value to your client to be worth what it is that you're getting paid. And that's where I think we're going to see the shift. I think that's what's going to drive us, back to the first question and talking about, Buffini's bold prediction. I think that as more agents have to articulate their value, those agents that don't have enough value are not going to be able to get the commissions that previously they could have gotten. And as a result, they're going to see their income drop because everybody who sold real estate, you've worked with an agent on the other side of the table who was the best agent you've ever seen. They did everything they were supposed to do and they were worth every dollar they got paid. And then your next transaction you worked on with the worst agent who just was causing problems the entire way and made it way more difficult. They weren't worth $1, but they got paid the same amount as that agent you worked with on the previous transaction. And that's the shift that we're going to see.
So that's interesting to me, Matt, because it made me think of something. So how does this practically impact the way that agents do business and or the consumer, right? The way, what you brought up, that scenario you described. And it made me think, it's interesting because for sellers, they typically will do multiple interviews in order to pick their listing agent. But yet a buyer's agent, it's like the first one that calls me back, I'll work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're decent enough, right? And I wonder if this will shift into causing buyer's agents, because that barrier of entry into being a buyer's agent is like super, super low, right? I mean, you get your license, you could go find a buyer, you could sell a house. Is that going to make that more complicated and more, more skill-based, more experience-based, all the things that we've been talking about before and that we'll continue to talk about today?
Absolutely. I think that's what's going to drive the shift in the industry, is that the last numbers I saw from the Association of Realtors, 7 out of 10 buyers work with the first agent that they meet. They don't ask any questions. And so now when they're looking, we know that they start by looking at properties online first, and then they'll go to open houses and they'll talk to an agent. So now if they're looking at properties online and they see 3 properties that are all the same price, and they see, well, this one's offering a 3% commission, this one's offering $1,000, and this one's offering 1.5% commission. What's going on? They're going to start to ask some questions. And I think that anytime a buyer asks questions at the beginning of the process, it's better for experienced professional agents. If buyers were just to ask a couple of questions at the beginning of the process, most agents would go out of business. If buyers asked a question of, have you ever done this before? Have you ever sold a house in this neighborhood before? Do you have another job, that's going to prevent you from helping me, during the day? Like if they asked just 5 questions would knock, half the agents, out of this business if buyers just ask those questions. And so I think that this is really going to push buyers to ask more questions. They're going to say, what's with this commission? How does it work? Why is this one different? And agents are going to have to really start to articulate the value of a buyer's agent very early in the process as a result of this. It's going to increase consumer awareness substantially.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, your turn.
Look, first and foremost, this idea of transparency is not new to our business. I used to carry MLS books, and I talk about all the time, the biggest shift that's happened in 20 years is it used to go consumer, then agent, then house. What's driving agents crazy is agent and house have flipped positions. Now it's consumer, house, agent. And we're demanding it not just in real estate. Think about everything else that we do and interact as consumers. We want to see what's behind the curtain to help us make an informed decision. People want to be part of the process. So I think it's great. Agree with Matt 100% that we've been on this band of transparency, and this happens to be one piece that's sitting out there that maybe has not been as transparent as it's now going to be. It's going to continue to be a trend. That's first. Second, I don't believe agents sell houses. I believe houses sell themselves. If Kendall, you came to me and said, we need a 4-bedroom house, I have 2 kids, we're expecting a third, there is nothing I can do to jam you into a 1-bedroom, 800 square foot home, and you say, okay.
Absolutely.
But what I am going to do is there is the expertise of my history and the ability to get you to closing in the process is what our service is about. And so in the process, because I believe that people are truly looking for a home to live in, unlike just say cash buyers that want to flip it, they're going to want to look at the home that fits them. And I think that's going to take priority over a certain delta in commission that the seller's offering to split with the buyer. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, number one, commissions are always negotiable. 2, this is a fiercely competitive industry. If the 3 of us are out for the same listing, we will fight tooth and nail to get it. And as soon as we do, we put our arms around each other and say, hey, either one of you got a buyer now? And I'm happy to share what the seller is offering me to sell their house. I'm willing to share it with you if you bring a buyer to the table. And so that's what I've always loved about this industry. It is wildly competitive, but super cooperative. And as long as that's in place and commissions are negotiable, I think buyers are going to pick the best house with their agent that fits their circumstances. And if they see what the commission is associated with it, great, they're more informed. But I don't believe it's going to significantly change the lives of real estate agents.
So you made a comment about competitive, then collaborative, but yet we have this new MLS potential change that's coming down the pipeline associated, with the coming soon listings, pocket listings, exempt listings. Recently NAR published a proposal titled the Clear Cooperation Policy, and it basically is meant to ban or limit those new marketing trends, right? Because exempt listings, which is what it's called in my market, because we don't have anything at all in our MLS about coming soon, right? And they tried to almost ban coming soon in our market through the exempt listing rule, which is basically when we withhold, this is when agents withhold the listing from the MLS for a period of time with the seller's permission. And typically, just for our audience's sake, I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. This is done to allow sellers time to prepare the home for market. That's traditionally what that time has been for. But now, and this started in the recent past, some agents have basically innovated this time period and use it as a marketing tool to drive traffic to a listing, either as soon as it's entered into the MLS or prior to being entered. The controversial part, from my understanding, is that some agents are showing the homes exclusively, so they're not cooperating, prior to allowing access to the broader MLS during this pre-market time. So this is, in my mind, I know it's becoming a really hot topic. Inman is doing a gazillion articles. Inman News is doing a gazillion articles about it right now. Compass has expressly come out against the policy shift, is my understanding, while Redfin seems to support it. And of course, Nick, Inman News did an article quoting several industry leaders, including yourself, and you stated, we respect the spirit of the proposal and have seen similar policies work in local markets, but whether or not it's the right solution at the national level remains to be seen. So, Nick, I ask you, do you have any other additional thoughts to share here? Are you saying that this is just a distraction, or is this something more?
First, if we were not in as strong of a seller's market, we wouldn't even be talking about this. Second, I think we need to break down the difference between a true pocket listing and coming soon. Mm-hmm. Here's where, I probably looked a little more neutral than some of the other industry execs that commented in that article, but here's why. One is I'm seeing it work. Well, let me back up. There are currently MLSs that have this rule and some that don't. And so we're seeing both sides of that equation. Personally, I'm a fan of, if people are truly using it in the spirit in which it's intended, like a coming soon 5 days, they're cleaning out the garage and repainting the bedroom and getting their home ready, and people are driving by and saying, hey, this house may be on the market. I get that piece of it and I can support it. And at the same time, when we're seeing the level of what MLSs were designed for, which is the spirit of compensation and cooperation, mm-hmm. Kind of be bastardized, for lack of a better term of saying it, I don't agree with that. Because then I don't think that's the spirit in which our cooperation in our industry is intended. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm seeing people take what coming soon and totally abusing it. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the homeowner. But then at the same time, I respect that a seller and agent should decide how they want to market their house. So essentially, I think what we're solving for is people that are abusing it in a way that it's not good for the cooperation of the industry, and abusing it in a sense that isn't really good for the agent. Because let's rewind 50 years ago when MLSs came out. What it was whoever the big players in town were dictated the rules. And so they had agents running all over. They couldn't get a hold of companies to show their listings. And it wasn't just about sellers, it was about buyers as well. And it wasn't a spirit of cooperation. But some of the big companies were dictating the rules and they wanted it that way. And that's where I'm on board with. There has to be an even playing field, because now I look at the company that I say, we're one of the big guys, but we still support what it's like to be a little guy and starting out. And we are not here to dictate the rules to say, hey, just because we have national, international presence, now we're going to try to dictate the rules. We're not. We believe in the spirit of cooperation. That's how it should be. I would support coming soon for even a limited period of time. Is that 3 days? Is it 5 days? And that's probably where I was more neutral in this, because it's saying either all or nothing. And I think there's probably a level of in between that could be good for a consumer, and still support the spirit of cooperation. Long-winded way to say, right? There's arguments on both sides. Did you believe me?
Matt, I'll let you respond.
Yeah. So for us, I mean, we're in one of those markets that already has this. I mean, I agree with Nick that there can be reason for the coming soon. You can build up a little bit of momentum. You can build up a little bit of, kind of buyer demand if you have this coming soon. But in my mind, coming soon really just means there's a sign out front that says coming soon.
Wait, Matt, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry, real quick. Clarify, you have a policy that bans pocket listings and coming soons, or you have a MLS that allows coming soon? I'm sorry.
Our MLS bans pocket listings and coming soons.
Got it. Okay.
So ours, it sounds like it's a little similar to yours, Kendall, but in that we have a prep period. But during that prep period, between when the listing agreement is signed and the going active date, there is zero marketing allowed of the property. So you still get that time. You can have up to 30 days to prep the property where you've already got your listing agreement signed, but you can do zero marketing. The sign can't be up. It can't be listed on Zillow as even for sale by owner. It can't be a coming soon. And there are substantial fines. And this is the way we've been longer than I've been in the business. I've been in this business for 10 years, and it was like that before I got into the business. And it's, and I understand that there's certain places where the coming soon can be appealing, or could be useful. But what I really look at this is, there are certain circumstances where a seller would not want the property on the market, and I can understand that. And so there's going to need to be certain exceptions when a property is going to be sold off market. But when you look at serving the consumer's best interest and the spirit of cooperation, the consumer is served by getting their property in front of as many buyers as possible. And we know that buyers are searching online. And if you're in a market that allows you to market properties without syndicating it to the MLS, I believe that the seller is not being served. And a buyer is not finding the property unless they're going to your specific brokerage website and looking at your company's pocket listings or exclusives. And I don't think that serves the consumer, in 99% of circumstances. I know that there are industry experts, or I don't even know about that many experts, but there are companies that are fighting this move towards transparency. But that's because there are companies that are trying to continue to use the data as the value proposition. They want to say, you have to come to my website if you want to buy a property in this town, because that way they can control the ancillary services, they can control the leads, they can control the whole process. And that's not the direction that society has been going for the past several decades, and definitely not the way that the younger generation is. When we don't want to be controlled and told we have to use this particular product if we want to buy a house. So I think that I'll take a little bit of a bolder stance on this, but I think that any company that is opposing transparency is going to be on the wrong side of history when this is done. I don't think the consumer is going to look at anybody favorably that's trying to basically hide information or say, you have to come to me, I'm the only one that will tell you which houses are for sale.
Yeah, and if I can comment, Matt, to your point, I totally agree that when there are companies that, come on, let's get real here, that they're not really saying what's best interests of transparency in consumers. It's, hey, we're going to get big enough to use the data to drive people only to us. That's where I totally don't support it, because guess what? I bet those companies weren't around before MLSs existed. And if we go back to that level of fragmentation, good luck setting up a showing, finding the keys, or how it's going to work. And that's where I am not supportive of blocking it when it's put in that framework. And so I think, Matt, to your point, that's great. That's why we are saying we absolutely believe in transparency. We absolutely believe in the best interest of the consumer. And we also believe that if just because you're getting bigger in town doesn't mean that you get to dictate the rules that only favor your company. We are out for following what favors the industry, not just us.
Sure.
Right.
Now, I know I've heard in the past from people, and if we can just limit our comments to this particular point, but I would be remiss not to bring it up because I know people that use that pre-marketing piece, right, strategically. And I know their argument has been, well, the MLS doesn't have the right to restrain the way that I do business or market. So I've heard that argument, but I will say this to that group. You guys may or may not agree with me that one of the ways to, I've realized to get around this rule is just don't put your listing in the MLS ever, right? Because there's that option in our market. If you withhold it from the MLS, then guess what? You can do what you want with it. That according to what the seller agrees, right? Obviously. So I guess that's the solution for that small minority, I would say, it sounds like, that believe that, they want to be able to do this uncollaborative or non-collaborative marketing, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't know that it even has to go to, kind of the spirit of collaboration. I think it's creating exposure for the client. As the MLS has created a avenue for you to advertise in a way that you could never afford to advertise a client's property. To be able to get that kind of exposure you can get by putting a property on the MLS would cost thousands and thousands of dollars if you were trying to replicate that by putting it on all these different websites. So I think that it's in our MLS, it's not an option. If you're a member of our MLS, you put every listing on. That's it. Your option is to don't be a member of the MLS. And I think that kind of what's lost in it a little bit is that, you're trying to create marketing exposure for your client, but we have to really look at the change in what the role is. When Nick says that it used to be, consumer, agent, house, and now the agent's not in between. The consumer can find the house. Well, that's fine, and that's not going to change. And if we're trying to kind of get back in between that and say, well, you have to have the agent to be able to find the house, I think that that's what's going to be pushing us in the wrong way. So I think that the agents that you're talking about, Kendall, that are they want to do this their own way. They want to be that in between the consumer and the house. I don't think that that's the direction that the industry is going to support.
Consumers won't have it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we forget all the time that consumers are driving the bus on our process now. We're not. And anyone that says, hey, I'm the agent and I can control everything again, I think you're missing out.
Right. Missing the boat.
Yeah. But let me also add, I told you, I went out and sold real estate this summer. I used Coming Soon on my listing, but it was 5 days. And I had signed the agreement. I had agreed that there would be a co-op to someone that brought a buyer's agent or brought a buyer to the transaction. So I had already agreed prior to doing my Coming Soon that I was going to share my commission for someone to bring a buyer. But it just stimulated a lot of interest because of the neighborhood, the dynamics of it being a seller's market here in Denver. And it was great for the buyers, great for the sellers. I had a 90-minute open house with over 200 people in it. And it was in MLS that day. And then we had offers. So I think when it's used in that capacity, I'm okay with it.
It's strategy at that point.
Yeah. And it was good for everybody. And I didn't double end the deal, possibly could have, but we selected the best offer, which came from another agent through the MLS. But it created so much interest in that 5 days that then we had a number of offers to look at. So I think it was good for everyone involved. So it's the abusing it, and it's what we mentioned earlier that I'm not supportive of.
Understood.
Right.
So I want to circle back to Buffini again. And his mid-year review in 2019, he also commented, as you said, Matt, about the increased commission pressure having an impact, as well as the increased membership plus low inventory. We mentioned that earlier. But really also the number and size of teams. Now, I believe that there is no doubt that teams have disrupted the traditional brokerage model for the last 5 years easily. And with team versus brokerage, I want to know with you guys, what's your bold prediction? Because today, in a lot of ways, they seem at odds. But in my opinion, I think that teams and brokerages can function symbiotically. But I want to know from you guys, should teams and brokers fear one another or embrace each other towards mutual success? And then how would you recommend teams and brokerages work together? Or should there be, and also too, should there even be limitations on teams that should they get too big that they have to break off and create their own brokerage at that point? And is that good for the industry? Is that what we want? You know, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I'll go to you, Matt, first.
Yeah, so I think that teams are an interesting dynamic, because I've seen a lot of people talk about how teams are really kind of just the brokerage of 25 years ago. You know, you're going back to getting 50-50 split. The team or the brokerage is helping you generate business. They're paying for your marketing. They're doing all these things that the brokerage used to provide. But then as we saw the progression of the industry, agents became more independent. They became more fee sensitive, and the brokerage was, and consumer behavior changed. So the brokerage was less and less valuable. The consumer didn't go to the brokerage. You didn't have to go to a brokerage if you wanted to buy a house. You started going online. The broker was no longer controlling the information. And yet agents have always struggled, we call it the real estate lifestyle. Agents have always struggled with how the industry works and how consuming it is, and how it can take over your life. And as brokerages provided less support, and then agents found out that they didn't like the result of the lifestyle, teams were sort of sold to them as the solution. This is the solution to the problems that you're facing of working all the time and having to do all this yourself. But I really think that for most agents, the team model was a false, it was a false solution. Most of the teams that I have seen, the team leads work just as much. They make less money. They have more overhead and more expense. And so I guess I would disagree with Buffini on this one, in that I don't think that the teams model as we currently see it is still going to be a viable model in 5 years. I think that the team model of a team leader who is buying leads, who is trying to get a 50-50 split, and all of those, all of the components of a team, I don't think it's going to be the popular model in 5 years. I think that we will potentially see a shift more towards independent agents who are getting support from a brokerage or an assistant, and really leveraging scale, technology, and systems to run a highly profitable business, rather than running this team model that isn't actually solving their problems.
So you see it as a distraction, because I do recognize, as a broker, I've seen a lot of teams struggle with profitability. Really, they look like they're doing really well, but they're not, because their overhead is so high. They're not really profitable.
Right. I think it's a distraction. I think it's something that's being offered as a solution to a problem that everybody feels the problem, and this is being offered as the solution. This is the magic. This is the easy button to being, to starting to get some time off. But in reality, very, very few teams are actually able to achieve any sort of leverage and scale, because the economics don't work. The economics of the team model don't work.
Interesting. How about you, Nick? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, we got something we disagree on, Matt. Let's go. No, here's where I think their direction, but I think we got to step back from it and define team. Because as an individual agent, the key to driving business is making sure you're in front of people that need to sell and want to buy. And where we saw teams come up is the administrative work of entering the listing in the MLS, washing the car, making marketing materials. All of those things are not generally considered money-making activities for an agent. They're needed, but they're not direct money-making activities. And so what we've seen is, this is where I support a true team, is if I'm the rainmaker of my group and I can only do so much as an individual, if I can take my non-money-making activities and have team members that focus on that, that allows me to possibly double my business, because I can spend time where money-making activities count. Rewind the clock to 04, 05, 06. We've seen teams blown up before, and then they completely went like this. But what we saw in 04, 05, 06 was teams took the concept that I just talked about of how get your money-making activities out of your hands. And also, let's rewind to 2011. There were 4.8 million transactions, there were 4.5 million online leads. Well, last year there were 5.5 million transactions and 89 million leads. So there's all this real heavy lead activity. And I've seen teams now systemize that because it's kind of in the initial term a non-money making activity. What happened though is team leaders let their ego get in the way of profitability. It was add a transaction coordinator or an administrative staff, add one licensed agent to help you do showings. Maybe add a listing specialist because you couldn't be on every appointment. And so what we saw in the data of teams is when you had 1 to 4 people, the team leader had maximum potential on profitability. And then they started adding 5, 6, 7. We saw the bell curve hit that they said, wow, now I own my own company essentially, and I'll add 3 or 4 more people. And we saw the volume of the team increase, but the personal income of the team leader decrease. And their egos push them past what a team is about. And that's where, Matt, I was kidding at the beginning, probably where I would agree with you that's that spot at which I don't think teams work for the efficiency of the team leader. Today, I do think because of the online lead business that you can have an online lead person that shovels through, incubates leads, gets them to a point to where they're at. Because come on, the vast majority of agents don't respond to leads. And when they're out busy showing property or at a closing, they're not responding in 15 seconds, which consumers want. And that's how you lose your sphere. And so I think that there are specific roles within a team on transaction coordination, online coordination, incubation of leads, someone that can show houses and listing specialists. And I mean, a team of 5, we see them do tremendous amounts of business and they get their life back. They're not working 14 hours a day. I think we'll continue to see that. And even if we had a significant downturn, which I don't think we're in front of, I think you'd see those types of teams succeed. I think when you get into these teams that are 20, 30, 40 people, is it really a team? Or is it just a whole bunch of people using resources like a brokerage? But the one thing no one talks about is license law. I mean, a lot of these team leaders aren't employing brokers, and so they have to find a place to be. But the conflict that I'm seeing is based, number one, on business model. That you have these big teams that Matt mentioned, say a economic 50-50 split, whatever that is, that the teams are recruiting the agents in, maximizing profitability on that particular agent, but then they're on a much different compensation scale with their office. And so it's eating broker margin, owner margin. But it depends on your business model. Those that have, say, 50-50 splits, and then the team leader's on a 95-5 or whatever, then the team leader's taking the margin away from the broker. And those brokers don't want to say it out loud, but they actually don't like teams in their company because they're eating their margin. In others, where it's more of a fair share model, kind of similar to ours, it doesn't necessarily impact the margins of that agent joining a team versus a broker. It can, it depends on how the office is set up, but that's the number one piece where I see the conflict.
Interesting. So direction, disruption, or distraction?
I'm going to say direction, that teams will still be important. Distraction, that they get too out there, too big, crazy, and they're not really what is a team for efficiency for a team leader. Where
it's not about leverage and maximizing profitability. It becomes more about just, can I be the biggest pony or the biggest dog in the fight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So this last topic, before I get to the 2 bonus topics, and hopefully we have time for those, is that it's really near and dear to my heart, right? So, there's been I would say it's somewhat recent and a major trend in transition from customer service to customer experience, from marketing listings to marketing self, from transactions to relationships, from cold calls to personal texts, from automated emails and drip campaigns to artificial intelligent chatbots, from photos to video, and of course, from print marketing to the ever-evolving social media and digital space, where the platforms there keep growing, expanding, and innovating. Honestly, it feels like almost every day. So because of this, there have been agents in the business that have been in 10, 20, 30 years. Are they at risk because their business and marketing models are dated and possibly irrelevant, considering, the way the consumer wants to consume data these days, both digitally and I would say even instantly? And really, any agent that isn't willing to make a transition or any of these transitions, will they survive in the real estate space in the coming years, or are their days numbered? I don't know. I just wonder if this is a reflection of the new industry direction, or is this just another fad and temporary distraction? What are your thoughts, Nick? I'll start with you.
I'll go back to the foundation. I believe it's the consumers are driving the bus here. I tell agents all the time, they get a lead, for example, and say, well, phone, sorry about the sun, by the way. You know, when the blinds have a quarter of an inch between the window, the sun is hitting me just right. I will hear agents all the time say, phone is better. I always call. Well, I know I'm not 30 years old anymore, but I'm of the generation, don't call me. You'll get me through social or text a lot faster than on the phone.
Right.
And so we look at, here's an example I tell, especially seasoned veterans in this business. First-time home buyers last year, 46% were first-time home buyers, but 74% were 37 years old or younger. We've got to be catering to what they want versus how we think the way we've always done it works. And so we've got to be able to be super flexible and willing to engage in whichever one of these mediums our clients are in. Because let's throw something out. If we knew that 90% of the clients were using social and that's where our business was going to come from, then I would say you should figure out how to be involved in social.
Mm-hmm.
We have to go to where the customers are and how they want to communicate.
Very good. How about you, Matt? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would fully agree. I mean, when you have, I have agents that have been doing this for 30 years and they have their database and they say, I'm not going to do social, I'm not going to do anything different. And I tell them that's fine, but you're not going to expand your database if that's the case. The clients you already have that like the way that you're communicating, you'll maintain them, but they're going to buy their last house. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're okay with that database shrinking, then you don't have to make a change. But anybody that is still looking to say, I want to be growing, you need to be adapting. But I think that this is a tremendous opportunity because, you know, as Nick said earlier, you know, if the consumer had to buy a house every 30 days, you know, this would be a totally different process. This is a very complicated process, and video and podcast and, you know, kind of that allows you to share very complex information in an easily digestible format. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that, you know, nobody is going to sit and read a 10-page guide on how to buy a house and the process, but they'll watch a 5-minute video of you talking them through the process and demonstrating, you know, pieces of the process. And so I think it's a tremendous opportunity for agents to be enhancing that client experience. And really it comes back to providing value. Your value is in the transaction itself. Your value is, all right, you found this house, I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to help this happen. And using social media and video to really be able to articulate to the client, this is how I'm going to do it, I think is a tremendous opportunity for real estate agents as the industry keeps shifting. So I'd say this is the new direction. I mean, this is the way that you have to communicate, and you have to be engaging with the consumers that are a vast majority of the market right now.
Absolutely. I agree with you guys. I definitely think it's direction, and I do not think video is a fad or social media at this point. I mean, it just is what it is. Get on the roller coaster, folks. So my last two bonus questions are, the first one is the market status. You know, a lot of people, you know, we've had an interesting market since 2004 to present, the last 15 years. In fact, I tell people that because people are worried about some shift. And I think for the last year, I've been hearing there's a shift, it's happening, it's coming, you know. And one of my sayings is, if you've only had your real estate license in the last, 10 years or less, you've never known a down market. I mean, not a down market. You've never known a normal market. That's what I mean to say. You've never known a normal market. And so we wouldn't know it if it smacked us in the face. You know, where are we headed? Because you guys have some great, smart, experienced brains. And I can't let you guys walk away without telling us about your predictions for the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, whatever you like. Nick, you want to go first?
Let me go first? Sure. I think we're in for a number of years, I'm going to say the next 3 years of a continued strong real estate market. Will we see average days on market for sellers go up next year? I believe so. But come on, we've been at rock bottom in most major markets for a lot of years. There's something that's driving this. I am not a leading economist, but I do know this, that let's make it super simple. We are in a supply and demand business. And when there are people that need shelter, we sell houses. And look at, there were 80 million boomers, or there are 80 million baby boomers in our country. The X generation only had 40 million. And then you look at millennials and Y are upwards of 85, 90. So I would argue that we had two things driving household formation that's pushed it out. People are getting married later, they're having children later, and because of student debt coming out of college, it's impacting those other two items. So we have those three major things that are pushing out household formation. And I have a conspiracy theory, we would have got through subprime a lot better if we had had 80 million Xers, the same amount, if not more, than boomers, because we would have had the demand that was there for housing. But look, there's a 6 to 8 year period of time that household formation happens with each generation. And when you look at the pent up demand, number one, new construction is finally coming out of the ground in most markets. And we've got now double my generation, millennials and Ys, right behind us that are increasing demand on housing. That's what's keeping inventory levels so low. We have a lot of people that want to buy houses. There are still multiple offers and a race in certain price range, especially for first-time home buyers. So that's not our crisis. That's why I believe overall we're going to have a good real estate market. The challenge that I think we're going to see more of is affordability. I don't think we'll see as aggressive price increases, and I think we'll see higher average days on market, but that's not a bad thing. But I don't see, barring any crazy surprises in our country, I don't see any major crash or significant change.
Interesting. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's our inventory problem is really what's going to keep the transactions moving. I mean, it's in our market, in my market especially. I mean, we have incredibly tight inventory. We've got a strong growing economy and a vast number of people moving to our market every single year, and we don't have the housing inventory to keep up with it. You know, there's not enough new construction. Affordability is an issue, but we've already seen our market somewhat. I mean, it's kind of been an interesting dynamic where our price appreciation has been relatively flat, but our transaction volume is still growing. And our days on market is less than 30 days on market. And during the kind of the peak of the season, it's less than 20 days on market, but we're not seeing a lot of appreciation, I think, because we're kind of at this affordability crisis, with one way to look at it, where you've kind of tapped out how far most consumers can go in terms of their spending. So I think that we're going to continue to see strong transactional volume. I don't think that we're going to see as much appreciation as we did over the past couple of years. But you know, there's in markets with strong economies and a strong job base, there is an undersupply of housing that is going to last for another 5 or 10 years potentially.
And you said it right there, Matt. If we want to look at the single indicator, it's jobs. When people have jobs, they feel good about themselves and they buy homes. And as long as the employment levels are doing as well as they are, people will buy homes.
So I often hear people talk about low inventory all the time. And I just want to kind of acknowledge this for some of our agents that might be listening that are like, well, why do we have a low inventory? And in my experience, I can think of two reasons. One, during the market downturn, we had almost a cessation of new construction being built for a period of time. It felt like it just significantly dropped. Number two, what about all those investors that were purchasing those short sale homes and those foreclosures? And I remember there was several of them that were like huge hedge funds that bought lots and lots and lots of houses in my market and was going to hold them for 5 to 7 years. And I realized that 7 years is now up. I mean, they have not released those houses on the market that I've seen in any significant rollout as well. I mean, do either of you have any thought or comment on that? Do you think that's having an impact at all, those buyers that are now, investor owners and sellers that were renting out those homes. Any thoughts on that? Or do you think they are selling them? They're just doing private sales to their renters?
We had a lot of that as well in our market. A couple hedge funds were buying a lot of properties, and we are seeing them start to resell them now.
Okay.
It's happened in the past year or so, because we've seen two things. We've seen prices are not appreciating, and our rents in our market, our rents are also not rising. So when you kind of have those two factors, you now have these hedge funds that are sitting on assets that are not increasing in cash flow and they're not increasing in value. So they are starting to slowly sell some of those in our market, at least.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think some have already sold. I think some have continued. You look at rents from 10 years ago. Some of them are cash flowing very, very well, and others are recognizing that they don't think that there's going to be as big of price gains maybe in the next couple of years. I still think we'll have some decent appreciation in most markets, but maybe not 5, 8, 10%. And but yet they all don't make decisions at the same time to just unleash all the inventory. So do I see it just being a bam, we have an extra million homes on the market? I don't see it that way.
Right.
I think it just trickles in here and there, and it has for likely the last 10 years.
Interesting. So my last bonus question for both of you is, what are your final words of advice to our real estate and professional audience? And then I appreciate you so much for your time today. So Matt, would you like to go first?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, because this is what I've been working on for the past 2 months. We're in business planning season for my agents and marketing planning, building on marketing plans. So I'd say my advice for all the agents out there is get your database together. Just spend 2 days, bury yourself in a room and just get it done. And put together your marketing plan for the year, and put together a simple plan where you have one thing per week that you're going to do from a marketing standpoint, and you know exactly what it's going to be all year long. Because that way, when you get into April and you're busy selling, I have 1 hour to spend on marketing, but I already know what I'm going to do. So it's easy, and I'll just do my April activity so that I constantly am generating business, and I can get out of the ebbs and flows of production that, really pull a lot of agents down. So that would be my advice: is get the database done, and create your marketing plan for the year.
Love it. How about you, Nick? Final words.
Number one, focus on money-making activities. Get in front of people that need to sell or want to buy, however that looks, but spend your time there. That's where you'll make money. Second, I'm with Matt, database. There are so many agents that have not seen what the other side of a market looks like. And I'm not saying that we're just drastically going there, but we're going to start to see pieces of that show up. And don't be the agent that 6, 8, 10 months from now says, uh-oh, I don't have any leads, nor do I have a database to use to pull those people in. Don't use sticky notes and an iPhone to run your client base. If you are, a year from now, I think you're going to struggle to watch your sphere and your past clients go work with somebody else. So get that stuff loaded up and ready to go.
Wow, gentlemen. Thank you. This was by far so meaningful to me. I appreciate you guys for participating in this with me and being willing to share your wisdom, your knowledge, and your thoughts and your opinions about these hot topics and headlines. And I hope our audience got as much out of it as I did. So thank you guys so very much.
Great pleasure, Kendall. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall.